Hello and welcome to In Depth. I'm Tina Jha. 25 years after the dawn of democracy in South Africa, millions of citizens on Wednesday cast their ballots. They had 48 parties to choose from in the national as well as provincial elections. The elections come against the backdrop of corruption allegations that have been years associated with former President Jacob Zuma's time in office. His successor, President Cyril Ramaphosa, has promised voters that he will crack down on corruption in the ruling African National Congress. But the party founded by Nelson Mandela is also facing widespread apathy among voters. Born after apartheid, they are known as the born-free generation, who are up against the ruling party for keeping the country divided by economic inequality. The ANC is also facing the challenge of an insurgent radical party from the left, led by the charismatic former ANC member Julius Malema. Experts say that when the votes are counted, the ANC could end up a loser despite winning the election, because it will not be going to enjoy the majority that it had enjoyed before. In Depth today looks at the issues that South Africa is voting on, the implications that the elections have for the world, the history of a nation, the only one that practiced apartheid, and the fortunes of the party founded by Nelson Mandela, the ANC that ended apartheid. South Africa is voting to elect its National Assembly and provincial legislatures in each of its 9 provinces. This is the 6th election after 1994, when apartheid in the country ended and Nelson Mandela-led African National Congress came to power in the country's first multi-racial ballot. President and ANC leader Cyril Ramaphosa, who took over from Jacob Zuma in December 2017, is trying to retain his position.
South Africa is witnessing its most competitive elections since the end of apartheid in 1994. Political analysts are even calling it the biggest elections since the dawn of democracy in the country. The election is a test for the ruling African National Congress, which is seeking a 6th straight term. The African National Congress has ruled post-apartheid South Africa since the election of Nelson Mandela in 1994, winning all general elections since then. However, the ANC is facing a tough test in this election. Anger over corruption, a faltering economy, land reforms and inequality in post-apartheid South Africa are key issues in this election. Other election issues include discontent over poor basic services such as water, housing and electricity, and increasing crime.
This is seen by many people as one of the biggest challenges to the ANC after it came to power in 1994. So after 25 years, the challenge from within South Africa is mounting. The Democratic Alliance, which currently has roughly about 89 seats in the outgoing parliament, under its leadership, Mumusi Maimene, is challenging Mr. Ramaphosa's candidature or presidency, whereas there's another party which is the Economic Freedom Fighters, whose leadership Julius Malema is also in the fray. We don't really know how, but the issues are wide, but corruption remains one of the biggest issues and challenges, as is unemployment.
A record 48 political parties are contesting in these general elections in South Africa. The ruling ANC is facing stiff competition from the main opposition Democratic Alliance and left-wing Economic Freedom Fighters. Democratic Alliance's leader Mmusi Maimane has been leader of opposition in the National Assembly since 2014. He is being seen as the cleanest of the 3 politicians in the race to be president. In his campaign, he has promised to clean up corruption and provide jobs to the poor. The radical leftist Economic Freedom Fighters Party, on the other hand, was founded 6 years ago by former ANC leaders. The party, popular among the youth and the poor, has promised to seize land from largely white owners to give to poor blacks.
On such a historic day, it is important to vote here in Soweto with the people of Soweto to express a hope and a future for our country. Soweto, to me, represents in many ways the home of where the struggle is. And now we're entering into a new struggle, a struggle for jobs for many South Africans. And therefore, I call upon the people of this country to come out in their numbers today. It's a historic moment in our nation as we transition again.
ANC is fighting this election with a depleting voter base. Support for the ANC has fallen in every election since 2004. With winning 70% votes in 2004, the party only managed around 54% in 2016's local elections. However, despite its reduced majority, the ANC is tipped to emerge as the winner. Opinion polls suggest that the ANC will get just over 50% of the vote, with the main opposition, DA, likely to get about 20% of the total votes. The Economic Freedom Fighters is predicted to get 11% votes. An estimated 26.7 million voters are registered to cast ballots at 22,925 polling stations. Early results will emerge on Thursday, with an official winner declared on Saturday. The party that wins most seats in Parliament will elect the President, who will take oath on May 25th. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is hoping to restore the fading faith that people have in the African National Congress Party. According to economists, the 2019 elections will have serious implications on the country's economy, as global investors keep a hawk eye on the results of the polls. Election results, besides, will also see how the diplomatic ties between South Africa and India get better in every field.
As South Africa prepares for a new leader, President Cyril Ramaphosa faces a tough challenge to restore waning faith in the African National Congress Party after more than a decade of rampant corruption and misrule. The ANC is hoping to secure another majority this time. Ramaphosa came to power in February 2018 after Jacob Zuma resigned amid mounting scandals and civil society protests. The ballot comes at a time when the world is equally concerned about several issues impacting the state's economy as much as a voter in Africa is, as roughly half of the adult population in South Africa currently lives below the poverty line.
Well, I think historically the ties between India and South Africa have been very strong after the ANC government came to power. India had, because has always supported the ANC in its struggle against apartheid, and then lent its voice, and naturally, and Nelson Mandela, the person who led the freedom struggle, was somebody who himself drew inspiration from Mahatma Gandhi and his freedom struggles, and so I think all those is well established in Indian history. And there's a lot of Indian communities who work in South Africa. There's a huge immigration population, some from Gujarat, some from other parts of Africa have migrated and continue to work there. So we have a very strong people-to-people relationship, and in any case, the leadership level, it's been there for a very long time.
The 2019 general elections will have serious implications for the South African economy, especially if the ANC underperforms at the polls. From an economic perspective, South Africa has been on a slippery slope for the last decade, with real gross domestic growth averaging below 2% per year since the 2008 global financial crisis. According to analysts, the parliamentary elections would have symbolic meaning for the rest of the continent too. At present, financial markets expect the ANC to win around 60% of the votes that would most likely trigger a bullish response among investors. South Africa is a member of the BRICS bloc of economies as well, alongside Brazil, Russia, India and China, and is also a member of the G20 Forum of International Governments, so the impact will be felt by several countries.
This January we had the South African President Mr. Ramaphosa come to India as a chief guest. So that itself speaks volumes about the level of the interaction at the highest political level. Besides that, we are members of many multilateral fora where leaders of both countries exchange frequent notes. And we have much in common as economies which are, as I said, part of the BRICS formation. So that leaves a very good leverage to talk to each other, historical ties, apart from everything else, people-to-people contact.
The ANC in its manifesto has promised to push South Africa's growing economy towards higher growth, create more jobs, speed up sluggish land reforms and move towards implementing free education for students from poor and working class backgrounds. But critics have argued that Ramaphosa has been vague on how his policies would be implemented. However, there are manifold reasons why Africa's oldest political movement remains so popular even now. It is because ANC is still revered by many South Africans for the leading role it played in bringing an end to white minority rule. Even now, it continues to represent hope for many South Africans. With inputs from Astha Kulshresht, Bureau Report for Rajya Sabha TV.
In the run-up to the polls, there has been frustration among voters about a lack of progress in 25 years after Nelson Mandela's African National Congress swept to power at the end of white minority rule. Besides this, anger over corruption, the faltering economy and land reforms are key issues that the country is facing.
25 years after South Africa adopted a democratic system of government, citizens went to polls against a backdrop of economic problems, corruption charges against the ruling party, and widespread anger at a perceived lack of progress. The national election is the first under President Cyril Ramaphosa, who replaced Jacob Zuma as head of the state in February 2018 after 4 years as Zuma's deputy. Ramaphosa faces South Africa's largest opposition party, Democratic Alliance headed by Mamusi Maimane, the first black African to lead the centre-right party, and the leftist economic freedom fighters formed by former ANC youth leader Julius Malema in 2013. The African National Congress, which led the fight against apartheid, has governed the country since 1994. But its support has eroded as large inequalities have remained. The ANC has won every parliamentary election since 1994 but saw its share of the vote fall from past elections in 2004 and 2014. As economic growth faltered and corruption scandals multiplied, analysts predict that the majority figure could fall this time also, despite President Cyril Ramaphosa's efforts to clean up the governing party's image after a torrid decade under Zuma, during which its image suffered.
Well, I think South Africa is voting on May 8th to elect its National Assembly and provincial legislatures. Essentially, we see last year there was a change of guard in South Africa when Jacob Zuma had to step aside, and then Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa had taken charge as the presidency, and this is his first test when he goes to elections and test his popularity, having taken charge or come to the helm.
Under the 9-year tenure of former President Zuma, corruption became endemic within the ANC, leading to a dramatic increase in politically motivated assassinations. Years of corruption scandals implicating senior party officials and government ministers have further damaged the reputation of the ANC. Even after President Ramaphosa came to power, some voters still associate the party with the corruption. The inability of the ANC to curtail this rise is illustrated through deadly acts of vigilantism by members of under-policed communities against alleged criminals. Besides corruption, faltering economy and land reform are other key issues in the elections. Land is a highly emotive issue, with the bulk of productive agricultural land remaining in the hands of the white population since the end of apartheid in 1994. This land was forcibly taken from black people during the colonial and apartheid eras. Under pressure from the far-left EFF and more radical elements in the ANC, Ramaphosa last year launched a process to change the constitution to make explicit provision for land expropriation without compensation. The main opposition party, the DA, promised to prioritize land reform in the budget and release unused government land.
The biggest issue is corruption and unemployment. The rate of unemployment, according to various statistics, ranges around 26 to 27%. And if you remember, South Africa was one of the 5 emerging economies in the last decade. BRICS, as you know, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa were supposed to be the emerging economies in the last decade. But somehow over the years, South Africa has lost some element of its economic buoyancy. So that's one of the reasons why they will be trying and reviving it. Therein remains unemployment as a major factor, and also there is the issue of, as I said, corruption. People want, apart from the jobs, infrastructure is not so good in that country. Water and housing remains an issue. We all remember having read so much about Johannesburg running out of water. You remember it goes all over the internet. So there are issues, people are concerned, and obviously with 26 million voters, they're wanting to see a brighter future for themselves.
A number of surveys have also shown that while land reform has been a major issue among the citizens, most voters are more concerned about the stuttering economy and unemployment. South Africa has some of the worst unemployment levels, 27% among major emerging market economies. The three main political parties have all put job creation at the heart of their campaigns. South Africa has suffered sluggish growth and its economy has failed to expand by more than 2% a year since 2013. Another concern is voter apathy. Despite more than 26 million people registering to vote, the highest number in South Africa's history, local surveys suggest that 6 million people under the age of 30 are not on electoral rolls. Other election issues include discontent over poor basic services like water, housing and electricity, and anger over violent crime. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The quality of life may have improved for many South Africans since the landmark 1994 elections that ended white minority rule, but huge inequalities remain in South Africa. How the country has evolved from its colonized era to the present democracy. Let's trace the journey in our next report.
South Africa, officially the Republic of South Africa, is the southernmost country in Africa. From the 15th century onwards, most of the African countries were colonized by the European world powers like Great Britain, France, Portugal, Germany, Spain, Italy and Belgium. South Africa was officially colonized in 1652. The Dutch East India Company established a trading post in Cape Town under the command of Jan van Riebeeck in 1652. European workers who settled at the Cape became to be known as free burghers and gradually established farms in the Dutch Cape Colony. Following the invasion of the Cape Colony in 1795 and 1806, mass migrations, collectively known as Great Trek, occurred, during which the Wu Trekkers established several Boer settlements in the interiors of South Africa. Discoveries of diamonds and gold in the 19th century had a profound effect on the fortunes of the region, caught world attention and introduced a shift away from an exclusive agrarian-based economy towards industrialization and development of urban infrastructure. The discoveries also led to new conflicts culminating in open warfare between Boer settlers and the British Empire, who fought for control over the nascent South African mining industry. After the defeat of the Boers in the Anglo-Boer or South African War in 1902, the Union of South Africa was created as a dominion of the British Empire in terms of the South Africa Act 1909. The Dominion came to an end on 31st May 1961 as a consequence of 1960 referendum that legitimized the country as a sovereign state named Republic of South Africa. It was after this that a republican constitution was adopted. From 1948 to 1994, South African politics were dominated by Afrikaner nationalism, racial segregation and white minority rule, officially known as apartheid, and Afrikaans word meaning separateness came into existence in 1948 under British rule. It became the official law of segregation when South Africa became a republic. Under apartheid, non-white South Africans were forced to live in separate areas from whites and use separate public facilities. Contact between two groups was limited. Despite strong opposition to apartheid within and outside South Africa, its laws remained in effect for over 50 years. In 1991, the government of President F.W.D. Clerk began to repeal most of the apartheid laws. On 27 April 1994, after decades of armed struggle, terrorism and international opposition to apartheid, during which the Soviet Union supported the racial African National Congress, the ANC achieved victory in the country's first democratic election. Since then, the African National Congress has controlled politics in an uneasy alliance with the South African Communist Party and the Congress of South African Trade Unions. The immediate post-apartheid period was marked by an exodus of skilled white South Africans amid safety concerns. The new democratic government was saddled with foreign debt contracted by the former apartheid regime. The cash-strapped post-apartheid government was obliged to face a credit downgrading by foreign financial institutions. The debt was finally settled in September 2001. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
So that's it from us in today's edition of In Depth. We'll be back same time tomorrow with a focus on some other subject. You can also watch our program online on YouTube and Twitter. And don't forget to send your feedback and suggestions about our program. Thank you very much for your time.